Hello everyone and welcome back to the 3T Path channel and welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. Now we're starting here a brand new chapter, chapter 14. A new topic is going to come up and it's a very important topic, a topic which applies to all of us today, actually applies to us even more today than it did to Uddhava at the time of him asking these questions to Krishna, because the question is, look, there's so many recommendations for, advancing spiritually, for purifying your mind. There's so many recommendations. Uddhava is asking Krishna, are they all equally important? Or does one set stand supreme? This is a very important question because today we have like all the religions of the world at our fingertips. And within these, there are so many variations and so many different lineages. And so you're like, which one do I do? What's best? So I'm sure it's going to be very interesting to hear out Krishna's answer to this question. Now, of course, if you want to watch all the previous Uddhava-gita classes, remember this is class 67 already, so there's 66 previous classes in this Uddhava-gita course, then you can just check out the instructions in the description of the video here, and also go to Uddhava-gita.com where you can see how to become a member of this channel and just be able to access all these classes. Okay, so we are in the 11th canto, chapter 14, verse 1. Sri Uddhava said, "My dear Krishna, the learned sages who explain Vedic literature recommend various processes for perfecting one's life. Considering these varieties of viewpoint, my Lord, please tell me whether all these processes are equally important or whether one of them is supreme." So again, very important question, and especially for newcomers, my experience teaching, the Vedic path and yoga, spirituality in the West is that, especially, I think in general, but maybe especially in the West, sometimes it's hard to distinguish. It looks like it's just the one thing. Like you look at, okay, these people are doing like one thing, so oh yeah, it's Hindu. But it's not at all. It's like vastly different. Even people who are like, oh, he's talking about Krishna and he's talking about Krishna. Yeah, but they're talking about it in a completely different way. Different objectives, different priorities, different understandings of the basic concepts. It gets very confusing for the newcomer. This person is saying the word God and that person is saying the word God, but they mean something completely different. It's very hard for the Westerner to understand this sometimes because, they're kind of used to like things being a little simpler, but it can be very different viewpoints. So when you hear somebody saying God, they might be thinking of the Brahman. They might be using the word God in the sense of supreme, of something completely different from what you think. And another person might be talking about bhakti, but for them, bhakti is just a stepping stone into another state of mind where they don't have to worship anyone. So it's very different concepts. They can get very confusing. So it's a good question, and what I recommended you do is you sort of just, go deep, study. With me at least, like here we are doing Uddhava-gita, I have my full Bhagavad-gita course. Here we study the original scriptures. We go very carefully, stick to the original scriptures. We don't go creating, making up different concepts and mixing up different things. We stick with the teachings of Krishna. So then it gives you, so study the basics first. Go deep into the basics so you can understand everything, and then you'll be able to more easily see what the different paths are. So purport: in order to clearly establish the exalted position of bhakti yoga, or pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord, Sri Uddhava requests Lord Krishna to identify the supreme among all processes of self-realization. Not all Vedic processes lead directly to the ultimate goal, pure love of God. Some only gradually elevate the consciousness of the living entity. For the purpose of giving a general outline of the process of self-realization, sages may discuss the various methods of elevation. But when the time comes to ascertain the most perfect process, the secondary methods must be cleared from the path. So this is an important topic we often come around to. Primary, secondary, tertiary processes. Lots of good stuff. We're not saying, oh no, that's terrible, that's wrong. We're not saying that. It's just that you have to be able to organize the ideas, the concepts, and the processes. You have to know how they stand in a sequence, in a priority sequence from primary to secondary to tertiary. You have to understand how these things work, because otherwise you'll be putting your energy into a secondary process which isn't gonna do it for you. It's not gonna take you all the way there because you're not working on the primary processes. That's what it's all about. And so before I even read verse 2, and that's why, it's important to focus on and understand the lineage you're studying from, understand the purposes and the ultimate goals before you get into it. It's like, what are they selling? What's the end goal here? And, and really understand in simple terms, okay, what's your end goal? What do you want? Because you might say lots of things, but what are you going for? What's considered the highest thing. It's important to understand that, because then you can focus on, at least this makes more sense now, let me study more about it and then see how I can attain that. But at least I'll know what the ultimate goal is. Because otherwise people are just saying, just to become liberated, to free from suffering. Okay, that's nice. But is that your ultimate goal then, is just to become free from suffering? Or is there like a secondary goal that automatically comes when you achieve your primary goal? So you have to understand, don't just fall for that sounds good, because lots of stuff sounds good, but what's the ultimate thing? What's the primary goal? Verse 2, my dear Lord, you have clearly explained the process of unalloyed devotional service, by which a devotee removes all material association from his life, enabling him to fix his mind on you. So of course we've had wonderful chapters already, right? This is, we've had lots of stuff. We had 66 classes already, so we've covered amazing ground, amazing teachings by Krishna. And so Uddhava is saying, look, I know you've explained Bhakti Yoga, which is anipikshita, without any material desire. So you've explained this topmost practice. So I understand this. Purport. It is now clearly established that pure devotional service is the supreme process for fixing the mind in the supreme truth, Lord Krishna. The next point to be clarified is this: can everyone practice this process, or is it limited to an elite of transcendentalists? In discussing the relative advantages of different spiritual processes, one must immediately ascertain the goal of spiritual life and then isolate the process that actually awards this goal. Processes must be defined in terms of primary and secondary functions. A method that gives you the highest perfection is primary, whereas processes that merely assist or enhance the primary function are considered secondary. The mind is most flickering and unsteady. Therefore, by clear intelligence, one must fix oneself in a progressive mode of life. And thus one can achieve the absolute truth in this lifetime. This is the sober purpose of Lord Krishna's conversation with Sri Uddhava. So wonderful purport. And a couple of important points. One, the mind is most flickering and unsteady. Right? I think you know that as well. So, you have to use what we call buddhi. So buddhi comes in, you have a mind, your mind is like flickering here and there and switching topics and doing this thing. But then buddhi is what gives you the understanding of life. I'm just going to be posting a video on this very topic very recently, in about 2 weeks in this channel. But they're explaining the subtle body more carefully. But anyway, so your mind is this thing that's flickering, and your buddhi, your intelligence, is what determines and understands the world, and thus gives you the path and the priority and explains what has to be done. That's the idea of intelligence in the yoga system. So you have to have your intelligence determining to your mind the path forward. That's what we're doing here. That's what you're doing here. You're cultivating transcendental knowledge. You're strengthening your intelligence so you can understand what's going on, and thus you can have the right method so you can fix yourself in a progressive mode of life. What does that mean? Progressive mode of life. That means that you're progressing. That's what it means. That you establish a system by which you're actually progressing spiritually in your life. Like, even though your mind is like crazy, but you've got a system, and every day you are progressing. So you have a progressive mode of life. So your life is not a waste, or worst, a danger where a lot of people have lives where they're digressing, they're going down, they're not progressing, they're actually going down, they're polluting themselves, they're making things worse. So we have to make things better. And so you need a proper system, you need to understand and fix a proper sadhana, have a proper system, so like you're always on point, you know what's going on, you have an objective, you have your goals. You have your primary objectives in mind always. Verse 3, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, by the influence of time, the transcendentals, now he's going to explain why there's so many different ideas out there. So Krishna starts answering Uddhava. By the influence of time, the transcendental sound of Vedic knowledge was lost at the time of annihilation. Therefore, because in the Vedic system, the universe gets created and destroyed in a cyclic fashion. So always creation. It's not really destruction or creation. We use these words in English, but it's actually expansion and then retraction. Expansion, retraction. Because actually nothing gets destroyed, as modern physics will tell you. And, Sankhya as well. Things don't get destroyed. They don't pop up out of nothing and get destroyed into nothing. No, that concept isn't there in Sankhya Yoga, in the Vedic philosophy. Things get expanded and then they get retracted. Same idea with modern science, right? You have like the Big Bang, and then you're going to have the big contraction, and so nothing gets created or destroyed, but things do expand and get retracted, and thus life as we know it gets created and destroyed. So this annihilation. So so what happens is, in this process, of course, everything gets lost, including the knowledge around, the Vedic knowledge also gets lost at the time of annihilation, Krishna is saying. Therefore, when the subsequent creation took place, I spoke the Vedic knowledge to Brahma, because I myself am the Dharma enunciated in the Vedas. So I am Dharma. I am the source of everything. As Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, Vedaschar saham hameva vidya vedanta krit veda vireva chaham. I'm the maker of the Vedas, I'm the understander of the Vedas, and I am the purpose and the goal of the Vedas. So like, it's me. I'm the guy. So when things get restarted, you always have this process, and we've seen this in the Bhagavad Purana here, in the earlier cantos. If you go back to the earlier cantos, you'll see Krishna teaching Lord Brahma in the beginning of the universe. It's pretty cool. I mean, you just saw in the last chapter, Krishna appearing as Hamsa avatar, right? God appearing as Hamsa avatar to teach Lord Brahma and the four Kumaras. So this process is always there, the knowledge gets lost, and then somehow other Krishna comes and in some form, in some avatar form, God appears and restarts the system. As you know, famously in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says that he came down about 5,200 years because the knowledge was lost again on earth, and says, Yoga nashta parantapa, this yoga knowledge was lost, so I came down again to re-present it, to re-teach it. So he's saying this is what he does. When the subsequent creation takes place, I spoke the Vedic knowledge to Brahma because I myself am the Dharma enunciated in the Vedas. So I am the goal of the Vedas, and so I speak the Vedas every once in a while. I represent it. Purport. Lord Krishna explains to Uddhava that although many processes and concepts of spiritual realization are described in the Vedas ultimately recommend devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure, and his devotees directly enter into the Lord's hladini, or pleasure-giving potency. However, somehow or other, one must fix one's mind in Lord Krishna. And that is not possible without bhakti, devotional service. One who has not developed his attraction to Lord Krishna cannot restrain the senses from inferior engagements. Since other Vedic processes do not actually award Lord Krishna to the practitioner, they cannot offer the highest benefit of life. Simple concept. The transcendental sound of the Vedas is itself the highest evidence, but one whose senses and mind are entangled in sense gratification and mental speculation, and whose heart is therefore covered by the material dust, cannot directly receive the transcendental Vedic message. Thus, one cannot appreciate the exalted position of bhakti, of devotional service to the Lord. Verse 4. Lord Brahma then spoke this Vedic knowledge to his eldest son, Manu. And the 7 great sages, headed by Bhrigu Muni, then accepted the same knowledge from Manu. So here, Krishna, in Bhagavad Gita, he does the same thing. He's giving you like a little brief presentation of the concept of parampara, the lineage concept, the concept of guru-disciple lineage, where the guru teaches, one or more, thousands of disciples, and that disciple then teaches others, so he becomes guru, and then that disciple becomes guru, and it goes on like this through time immemorial, and here we are, still doing it. So that's the way it works. It starts with Krishna, and it gets transmitted. Now, what's important is that we stick with Krishna. In other words, that's why, at least in my lineage, we give so much importance, and I think it's very important, to the actual text, the scriptures, because what we see in other lineages is it's like, you just kind of like, let's just go with the guru, and then you'll see that they won't be talking about Krishna anymore. They're talking more about the Guru than Krishna. I've seen this. Maybe you've seen it too. And then you go in, and instead of having a beautiful picture of Krishna on the wall, you can't see, but it's a beautiful Krishna, pictures of Krishna here on the wall, everywhere, pictures of Krishna. Instead of seeing beautiful, Krishna in the altar, they have big pictures of the Guru. Because they kind of lost, the cool thing about, the important thing about the Guru is that he's doing this thing here. He's bringing this knowledge taught by Krishna. Remember, Krishna taught Lord Brahma teaches Manu teaches the seven. That's why, but it's not Manu that's important, or Bhrigu Muni, it's Krishna. We want that original information. And that's why we have scripture, so you can record the original information. And the Guru can, oh look, I'm teaching you this, and now you can understand this, and you teach that person like I'm doing with you here. But we're teaching Krishna's teachings. So I'm not doing like a whole, let me tell you what my Guru came up with, and we kind of forget about Krishna. That's what you see lots of Gurus doing. So no, we stick with Krishna. But there is a parampara, there is a, this explanation, this understanding of the whole thing, and understanding the priorities. All this comes down with the parampara. Purport: everyone engages in a certain way of life based on one's own nature and propensities. Bhakti Yoga is the natural activity of one whose nature is completely purified by association with the Supreme Lord. Other processes are meant for those whose nature is still affected by the material modes, and thus such processes, along with their results, are themselves also materially contaminated. Devotional service to the Lord, however, is a pure spiritual process, and by executing it with a pure consciousness, one comes directly in touch with the personality of Godhead, who described himself in Bhagavad-gita, verse 2 of chapter 9, as Pavitram Idam Uttamam, the supreme pure. This system of parampara, or disciplic succession, is illustrated in this and in the previous verse. The spiritual masters in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement are part of such a disciplic succession, and through them the same Vedic knowledge spoken by Brahma to Manu is still available. That's what you're getting right here. Okay. Now, verses 5, 6, and 7. Oops. Sorry. What happened here? Okay, here we go. From the forefathers, headed by Bhrigu Muni and other sons of Brahma, appeared many children and descendants who assumed different forms as demigods, asuras, human beings, guhyakas, siddhas, gandharvas, vidyadharas, charnas, kindevas, kinnaras, nagas, kimpurushas, and so on. All of the many universal species, along with their respective leaders, appeared with different natures and desires generated from the three modes of material nature, the three gunas. Therefore, because of the different characteristics of the living entities within the universe, there are many Vedic rituals, mantras, and rewards. So now Krishna explains things, beautiful explanations, vast concept of the Vedas. It's not like the Vedas, it's not like about, or like you see these other traditions, it's like about their little corner of this little planet, they're talking about, us little thing here. And the Vedas, they're thinking, it's all big, it's like, sure, they're humans, sure, there's this planet Earth, fine, of course, but we're talking about the universe here. Krishna is talking about all these different alien races here. These are all different, universal civilizations here. Like we would call them alien civilizations because they're not on planet Earth. These are different parts of the universe. These are different races. These are non-human races. And, it's wonderful. It's like it's just this huge view, right? It's a cosmic view. So Krishna is saying, look, and you see, if you go back, if you study the beginning of the Bhagavad Purana, it describes this process. So the process is that, it starts with Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma is responsible for populating the universe, and all these different civilizations spring up, these different beings, all based on the different gunas, because souls have different inclinations, and so their species are created to satisfy certain inclinations and desires of the conditioned souls. So you have entire species and civilizations, for the different mixes of the gunas, of the material modes of nature. So here Krishna listed this, these classic different species. You said because of all these different species, in different places and the different characteristics they have, so there are many Vedic rituals, mantras, and rewards to satisfy these different groups. And that's why it's so confusing. That's why there's so much stuff. I mean, never mind that there's so many different humans, there are many different species of advanced civilizations all over the universe, and they have different things that are important for them. So there are different processes, and that's why there's so much around. Very fascinating explanation. Purport. If one is curious why Vedic literatures recommend so many different methods of worship and advancement, the answer is given here. Brigu, Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, and Kratu are the 7 great Brahmana sages and forefathers of this universe. The Kindevas are a race of human beings who are, like the demigods, completely free from fatigue, sweat, and body odor. Seeing them, one may ask, Kimdeva, are they demigods? Actually, they are human beings living on another planet within the universe. The Kinnaras are so called because they are Kinchi Nara, or a little like human beings. The Kinnaras have either a human head or a human body, but not both, combined with a non-human form. The Kim Purushas are so called because they resemble human beings and thus prompt the question, Kim Purusha? Are these human beings? Actually, they are a race of monkeys who are almost like human beings. So this is Planet of the Apes. Types are the Kim Purushas. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur explains that this verse describes, I love this line, record this line in your mind, please. Describes the varieties of forgetfulness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Did you get that? This verse describes the varieties of forgetfulness of God. That's what the universe is. Varieties of forgetfulness of God. That's why we're here. That's why the mature universe exists, to satisfy this need to forget God, or even to pretend you are God. So all these different species and different, each with their own powers and planets and habitats and things and and whatever their trip is. So each one has this thing, whatever their thing is going on according to their desires and merits and forgetfulness of God. The different Vedic mantras and rituals are especially meant for the different species of intelligent beings throughout the universe. But this proliferation of Vedic formulas indicates only the variety of material illusion and not a variety of ultimate purpose. This is an interesting concept. So the many different things isn't because there are different goals. The different things is because there are different forms of illusion, but the goal is one. This is very important. Very important. And people don't get this. A lot of people I get it. We're sick of religious conflict. We hate it, right? The war is disgusting. So we hate all that stuff. Some people they kind of go through the other side. No, it's all the same. It's all good. All these things are equally important. Yeah, it's all different. It's all good. All these different paths. Yes. But no, the different paths are because there's lots of different forms of confusion. But the goal is one. Is to love and serve God and to be with Him in the kingdom of God. So that's the one goal. It's not that there's all these different things. The different things are here because they're different forms of confusion. But the goal is one. The ultimate purpose of the many Vedic injunctions is one, to know and love the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord Himself is emphatically explaining this to Sri Uddhava. So very good. Let's stop here and have a rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love.